Andrew Bridgen, Conservative MP for North West Leicestershire. Now, Andrew, not just is it an honour to have you on board anyway, but you actually have a bit of a story in the Mail today, don't you? Which I would like you to run us through, really. Bercow apparently is still at it, isn't he?
Yes, John Bercow. I've been putting some written questions in regarding his pension, and I believe he finally admitted to a reporter from the Mail on Sunday last night that contrary. Well, if I take your listeners back to 2010, the fallout from Labour's Great Recession.
A simpler time, wasn't it, 2010? Yes, carry on.
Well, there were three offices of state which, on immediately the moment you weren't in office, you got half your pay for the rest of your life, and that was the Prime Minister, the Lord Chancellor, and the Speaker. David Cameron and Ken Clarke decided, given the state of the finances, they would give up that right to a 50% pay for the rest of their lives. And the Speaker, John Bercow, put out a statement saying that he wasn't relinquishing it, but he wouldn't take it until he was 65.
How old is he, out of interest? How old is Bercow? I mean, to be fair, he looks 65.
Yeah, he was 57 when he...
But he's part of Labour now, so he's a socialist, so I would imagine that he's definitely going to be taking the money.
The fact is that eventually he crumbled and admitted that he's been taking his pension since the day he finished in 2019.
Wow.
So he went back on his word. I think he let Parliament down and sullied our reputation when he was Speaker, and I think now what he's shown is that his word's worth nothing. And quite honestly, as I wrote in the Mail on Sunday, I would, this latest insight to his deeply flawed character surely would preclude him from ever taking a place in the House of Lords under any government.
Well, no one's going to give it to him, are they, really? I would have thought. I mean, the Tories aren't.
He was, as you've seen, he was always pretty good at changing the rules to suit himself when he was Speaker. It would appear he's done the same now he's not Speaker. But again, it drags Parliament through the mud, and politicians' words count for nothing. And it all looks pretty self-serving.
Well, we did, and we also had to pay for his flat refurbishment, didn't we, as well? So, I mean, he's not one who does it on the cheap. I particularly like the fact that Wimbledon apparently have banned Bercow, so he tried to renew his membership, and apparently Wimbledon said actually no, and there's still some justice in the world. And actually it was, so Kelvin McKenzie will not mind me saying this, Kelvin McKenzie, my former boss, I was going to say nice guy, but I mean, Kelvin actually wouldn't want to be known as that. He once got turned down from a golf club just for being him, and he rung them and he said, "Why have you turned me down? You don't even know me." And they said, "We've never met Saddam Hussein either, but we don't want him here." And actually he liked that. I thought maybe that's the John Bercow approach to Wimbledon, isn't it? I think maybe. But look, just moving away from Bercow, because I actually just can't stand him. It's interesting here, the on the front of the Telegraph now, which is that children now apparently will only be jabbed if vulnerable. I would like your take on this, Andrew, if that's okay, which is that, I think it was a big contentious issue, wasn't it? And mandatory jabs, certainly for care home staff, which we spoke about earlier in the week, was a hot topic. Now, I think this will go down quite well, that children now will not have to be vaccinated.
Absolutely. I've been very opposed to this. I'm double jabbed. I had my second jab a month ago, AstraZeneca. But there are risks with these vaccines. They're not fully tested. They had to be rushed into production, clearly, to address the pandemic. There are risks, and it's completely wrong for us to vaccinate children who are at a less risk from COVID than they are from the vaccine to protect ourselves. That's immoral. It's interesting. I was last week. I was in my constituencies in a well-known supermarket, and a number of constituents came up.
Just say Waitrose, Andrew. Just say Waitrose.
We don't have a Waitrose or a Sainsbury's. It was Tesco's, Patrick.
Slumming it, Andrew.
And one of my constituents who approached me was a vaccination nurse, and we discussed this very topic. And this is a lady who vaccinates, is carrying out the vaccine. She's vaccinated, and she said herself that she would not have her own children vaccinated. And I think that's really good. And also, I think there's a moral dimension to this, that why would we use vaccines on children who are at no risk, healthy children at no risk in this country, when there's so many vulnerable people around the world who've got no access to vaccines?
Especially if the idea that a kid could now get coronavirus, not have any symptoms and not be affected by it, but go home and give it to grandma, granddad, mum or dad or whatever. Well, if all of those people have been jabbed now, then surely actually it doesn't really pose a risk. And that's kind of, I think, the thing. Now,
and also there's an aspect on the Hippocratic Oath that doctors and medics take to do no harm. Well, if you're carrying out a procedure which is more risk than the symptoms it's going to prevent, that is doing harm. That would be against the Hippocratic Oath.
Do you think it is a massive risk for kids then to get the jab?
And I think they're under almost minuscule risk from COVID itself, and there are very minor risks from the vaccine which outweigh that. And we can't vaccinate our children to protect ourselves and put them at more risk. That's wrong on every level.
Yeah, what are your views to this? Strong stuff, that from Andrew Bridgen. 03444991000 is that number. Text talking your message to 87222, or indeed tweet us at talkRADIO. Now, Andrew, there's a gift this morning. There's a gift on page 7 in the Telegraph. Independent Sage is run by left-wing anti-Brexit activists. Now, they've not even put that in quotation marks, so that's a fact. And you know it's a fact, which ironically, because Carol Cadwallader does not normally deal in facts, but this is a fact, apparently. So I don't know if you've seen this, but apparently this independent group of, supposedly government advisors, etc., kind of helping to advise the government on their coronavirus policy. Turns out they've got an agenda, and they've been quite straightforward about the fact that, well, I mean, weirdly so now, they've just come out and totally at random, no one asked for it. Carol Cadwallader has just gone, you know what? We're here. It's us. We're doing. How do you feel about this now? Because I think this will go down like a fart in a lift, frankly, with the public.
Well, they are Marxists and communists. They've got an agenda. We know what it is. I mean, they would have us in lockdown forever. They must be rubbing their hands together. But I mean, the scientists, I think the dire predictions that they've made none of them have ever come to fruition. They're a bit like the definition of an economist, someone who spends most of the time explaining why their last prediction was wrong. And yet, we carry on listening to them. Ultimately, they're not accountable to the public. They've had huge swathes of power over every aspect of our lives for the last 16 months. I think it's time for the government to take back control, to coin a phrase.
Well, obviously, I think now they need to. I think this is the thing, which is that we had, I said in my intro, we had the G7 stuff, we had Matt Hancock potentially cheating on his wife, and then we had Boris Johnson in the back of a cab without the mask on, and all this stuff, right? Of people, well, I mean, Ferguson as well, Professor Pantsdown, I mean, he was he was the one who predicted that we were all going to die, basically, and then also at the same time, not if you're, essentially, having casual sex with your lover, I suppose, which is literally what he did. So, you look at this now and you think, well,
and the Labour mayor of Leicester, of course, Sir Peter Soulsby, who admitted to repeatedly visiting his girlfriend during the lockdown. And obviously, you know how badly Leicester was ravaged by coronavirus. It's probably the city that's had the most time in lockdown in the country.
Yeah, but I wonder whether or not he said that just to prove that he had a girlfriend, to be fair. But yes, no, I think this is part of the issue, which is that credibility has gone there, hasn't it? And now when you actually look at people, it's easy for people to throw out there, they must have some kind of agenda. Well, actually, now we've kind of got proof that they've got a bit of an agenda. And I said yesterday that, a lot of this lot, they don't, not only do they not care about our economy being ruined, they actually want it to be ruined because it serves their version of politics, right? It creates...
Destroying the capitalist world.
Exactly.
Has anyone ever met a communist or a Marxist who hasn't got an agenda?
Well, no, I think by definition, some of them have written books. One of them is buried at Highgate Cemetery, actually. But look, what's your view on this now? Because actually, surely now this has got to be. I mean, this is awful, isn't it? The proof, if proof were needed, right, that actually some of the people behind the current coronavirus restrictions actually do have a far left agenda.
Well, at least we're hearing about this now, but I think we've really known that's been going on for a long time. I'm just so disappointed that so much of the mainstream media, the print media and the BBC have given these people huge airtime. At least that Mitchie character, she was outed, wasn't she, as a communist, and she didn't like it. I mean, let's have full transparency. One of the things about these scientists that have been advising the government and making these rules for us is they're not under the same rules as elected politicians. They don't have to disclose their interests, do they? So, they seem quite shy when they're exposed for what they really are. That is why they shouldn't be in the position of making those huge rules over us.
Yeah, absolutely. You would have thought there would be some kind of due diligence, really, with these people, but alas, apparently.
The problem is, I think, Patrick, we know that the academic world is overwhelmingly leans quite hard to the left.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
That's the pool you're fishing in.
Yes, we're fishing in a big communist pond, aren't we, when it comes to that kind of stuff. Just lastly, Andrew, I'd like to get your view on this because tomorrow is supposedly Freedom Day, huzzah! But a lot of people are actually scared about freedom, essentially, now. And it's because of stuff like this, isn't it? And what would be your message to people now who are thinking, well, look, actually I'm a bit wary about going outdoors, getting on the bus. We're so used to being shackled to Chris Whitty's radiator in his basement that we don't know what freedom tastes like. It's like Beirut all over again, isn't it, now? We're out there and we don't know how to handle ourselves anymore. What would be your message to people?
Well, I think they should read Graham Brady's article in the Mail on Sunday, where he talks about an element of Stockholm syndrome. It's clear when we do the review into how COVID has been handled that the government and the scientists have used psychological warfare against the British people. They've scared them, and obviously that's going to take some time to wear off. Ultimately, we have broken the link between infections, serious illness and death. And I think the story that's dominating all the headlines and the newspapers this morning about Sajid Javid tested positive, he's double vaccinated, and he says he felt a bit groggy. Patrick, I'm sure I have. After a good night out, I felt rather worse than that. And because he's tested positive, and the big problem is the reason that double vaccinated people are having to quarantine but coming into contact with someone who's tested positive is we haven't got enough tests to get people cleared that they haven't got COVID and get them back to work. And so Sajid Javid picking up COVID, feeling a bit groggy, could paralyse all of government. And every single business,
to be honest with you,
it's facing the same risk.
Yeah, it pains me to say this, Andrew, because I don't mean it, right? But it should paralyse all of government, because at the end of the day, if we're getting pinged because Dorothy 2 floors above us might have touched someone at some point that had COVID 2 months ago, right? And we're all having to shackle. The logic is that really it should paralyse government now. Anyone who's been on Sajid Javid's WhatsApp group should have to kind of self-isolate. Now that's the theory, but I don't think they should, obviously. But I mean, it will be interesting to see what happens here, really, because I do wonder whether or not actually this is potentially another example of one rule for them, one rule for us. Or presumably Boris might go, well, I didn't even download the app in the first place. I didn't want it. I just deleted it. Like the rest of us, because he is, of course, a man of the people. Andrew, thank you very much. Cheers for joining us today. Andrew Bridgen there, Tory MP for North West Leicestershire.